his own eyes, but the Lord ponders the heart. To do justice and judgment is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. You know what Solomon's saying there? It's not enough just to know what God's Word says. And it's not enough just to go and offer sacrifices to God. What God really desires is for you to humble yourself under the truth of what He said, to do justice and judgment, to humble yourself, to order your life under that truth from God's Word. It's not enough just to say we know God, and it's not enough just to know what God's Word says, but we actually have to be engaged in the process of ordering our lives under that truth from God's Word if we want to be able to impact somebody else's life for the good of God's kingdom. And fathers, that's especially pertinent for us, isn't it? Boy, it's hard, especially when your children get older. It's hard to tell them to do something that you're not willing to do in your own life, isn't it? It doesn't take them long to notice the inconsistency. Well, Dad, why can you say that word, but I can't say that word? Dad, why can you do this, but I can't do it? Well, that's a tough question to answer, isn't it? And if we're not consistently engaged in trying to order our lives under truth from God's Word, then those are the kind of questions that we're going to have. And do as I say, not as I do only works for so long. But all the best lessons, and everybody knows this, all the best lessons are not taught, but they're caught. How you live will make more of an impact on your children's life than anything you say, if there's inconsistency there. And so we want to be able to give our children and give younger believers instruction with our words, but we want to live those instructions out with our lives. If we're not willing to do that, if we're not willing to take this truth from God's Word and order ourselves under it, then all of our mentoring will be for nothing. All of our attempted mentoring will be for nothing. And then finally, not just knowing God, not just knowing God's Word, not just ordering our lives under truth from God's Word, but we have to be intentional about looking for opportunities to have some of that meaningful conversation so that we can impart that truth to our children. Got to be intentional about it. It's not just going to happen. Everybody's busy. If you want to know, just ask them. You have some people who are really eager to tell you how busy they are, but all of us feel like, almost all of us feel like we're so busy that we just don't have time to add anything else to our schedules, don't we? We're up in the morning, we're off to work, we're home from work in the evening, we're trying to get supper together, trying to get the next day's preparations made, we're in bed, we're up the next morning to do it all over again, and the cycle just goes on and on and on and on. We don't have time. Who has time to sit down for 10 minutes in the evening and have meaningful conversation with their children, especially if you've got more than one? Who has time for that stuff? I think we'd be amazed at just how much time we discover in our day if we just did some subtraction from the things that capture our attention. How much more time would we have if we took our phones when we came in the house and set them by the door somewhere and didn't pick them back up again until we left? That might free up some time, right? You wouldn't be worried about who was doing what with their children out there on their vacation or at their house. Maybe you'd be more worried about what you were doing with your children in your house. Or maybe if we turn the TV off. I mean, I know there are all kind of great entertainment options there on television. But what if we just turn the television off? Maybe we free up some time then, wouldn't we? A million different ways that maybe we could free up 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Maybe if we woke up 5 minutes earlier or 10 minutes earlier. That'd be an option, possibly. Cut out one game of golf a week. I don't know. Only you know what your schedule looks like. Only you know all the different ways you could free up 5 minutes, 6 minutes a day, 7 minutes a day instead of a week to have some meaningful interaction with your children, and especially for parents who still have children at home young enough to make an impact on them. And let's not miss that. We turned around last week and our oldest daughter's 10 years old. 10 years old. I don't know where 10 years went. But I know this, if I don't slow down and if I don't pay attention, I'll turn around again and she'll be 20. And guess what? All of those opportunities for meaningful interaction will be gone. All those chances to be a mentor to her, all of those chances to impact her life for God's kingdom, gone. Gone. I don't want to miss those because of a ball game. I don't want to miss those because I was so engaged in my phone or the television set that I just didn't have time to have 2 minutes of conversation with her. I don't want to miss those things. We have to be intentional about creating those opportunities. Mentoring is important, and here's what I want to leave you with this morning. We should mentor. Fathers, we should mentor our children. Older believers, we should mentor younger believers. And I'll give you 3 reasons why. One is because mentoring is God-honoring, kingdom-building work. The most important criteria for whether something is worth our time or not is, does this honor God? What do you think will honor God more, fathers, than your intentional investment in the lives of your children for the glory of God and for the advancement of His kingdom? What will honor God more than that? Older believers, what will honor God more than helping a younger believer succeed? What will honor God more than that? Than pouring your life into theirs for their good, so that they can avoid sin and heartache, so that they can live lives that are pleasing to God. That's going to honor Him. That's going to be pleasing to Him. Mentoring is God-honoring, kingdom-building work. It should be happening in this community of believers right here. It should be happening in my family. It should be happening in your family. It should be happening in this church. Mentoring, pouring our lives into the lives of younger people is God-honoring, kingdom-building work. That's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is mentoring brings joy like few other things can. I really believe that. We want to disconnect those things. We don't want to receive any positive benefit from honoring God a lot of times because we think that cheapens it, right? We think serving God should be miserable, that we should hate it the whole time, but just looking forward to our reward one day. Suffering saints for God's kingdom, right? Mentoring has rewards here. Mentoring brings joy here too. This passage that you've probably heard before in 3 John chapter 1, verse 4. John says, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. No greater joy than to hear that I have been able to mentor my children to the place where they are walking in the truth. No greater joy than that. Mentoring brings joy in the here and now too. Here's a final reason. When we mentor, those ripples will continue to spread long after we're gone. Listen to what Solomon says in Proverbs 4, verses 3, 4, and 5. He says, when I was a son to my father, tender and the only son in the sight of my mother, then he taught me and said to me, let your heart hold fast my words, keep my commandments and live. Acquire wisdom, acquire understanding. Do not forget or turn away from the words of my mouth. Solomon says, when I was a young man, my father, that was David, he said, my father sat me down, and he said these things to me. And so David mentored Solomon. David poured his life into Solomon. David imparted truth from God's word to Solomon, and guess what? Solomon took that wisdom and added to it by what God blessed him with, and he wrote these proverbs that have mentored countless people after that. The ripples just spread and spread and spread. When we mentor, when we invest our lives in the lives of our children, in the lives of younger believers, those ripples just continue to spread because you're not really just mentoring them. You're mentoring their children, and maybe even their children's children, and maybe even their children's children's children. When we mentor, when we pour our lives in the lives of younger people for the sake of God's kingdom, the ripples will continue to spread. So it's a really easy question to answer this morning. Who are you mentoring? Who are you pouring your life into as a believer for the purpose of helping them to develop the character of God and to live in a way that's pleasing to God? Who are you mentoring? Fathers, are you mentoring your children? Are you engaging in meaningful conversation with them for the purpose of imparting truth from God's Word to them? Don't leave it for somebody else to do. I'll be real honest with you, it's not my job. My job is not to mentor your children. It's not the children's minister's job. It's not Michael's job. It is your job to mentor your children. That's your responsibility. My job is to equip you, and my job is to encourage you. My job is to come alongside and help any way I can, to pray for you, to be there for you, but it's your job. I don't know that one day God's going to hold me accountable for not having mentored your children. But I know one day He'll hold me accountable as to whether or not I've mentored mine. Older believers, maybe you're not a father here. Maybe you're just a believer who's had a relationship with God for a while, who are you mentoring? You know, you can look around and say, oh, young people today, young people don't want to take any responsibility. Young people don't want to be involved. Where are all the young people? Well, let me ask you a question. Which young people have you encouraged? Which young people have you poured your life into to help them walk along the path to where they're ready to take over the job that you've been doing? I bet somebody might have done it for you. Who are you mentoring? If you're not mentoring anybody, then please keep the young people nowadays comments to yourself. Who are you mentoring? It's our responsibility to pour into the lives of other people, especially the younger people, especially people who don't have the knowledge we do. It's what we're supposed to do as a community of believers. Who are you mentoring? There's your question for this morning. Fathers, are you mentoring your children? Older believers, are you mentoring a younger believer? If you're not, then find somebody to mentor. Maybe you say, well, here's the problem. I feel inadequate. I don't feel like I can mentor. I don't feel like I have anything to give. Guess what? We've got an advantage that Solomon didn't have. We have the picture of the life of Christ to emulate. You remember what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 11? Follow me as I follow the example of Christ. There you go. I told you at the beginning of this series that all of our search for wisdom should cause us to run to Christ, and there it is. If you feel inadequate in your mentoring like I feel totally inadequate in mine, then let's run to Christ. Let's remember that God has given us not only a pattern to follow, but He has given us the righteousness of His Son in our lives. He's indwelled us with His Spirit. God has equipped us to be mentors. God has equipped us to make an impact on the lives of other people. Run after Christ. Run hard after Christ. Say to somebody who's coming behind you, follow me as I follow Christ. Yes, you're inadequate, but Christ is more than enough. And so if you don't have somebody that you are mentoring this morning, then I want to encourage you during our invitational time to pray and say, God, would you put somebody on my heart? Would you just convict me about somebody that I can invest in? If you're a father, maybe you want to come to the altar this morning and just ask God to continue to make you into the mentor, into the man that He wants you to be, that He needs you to be, that He's called you to be. Then do that. Maybe you want to pray that where you are. Maybe there's something else that God is speaking to you about this morning, but